everybody. Tonight we're going to be taking a look back at Anthem and ask the question, could it ever make a No Man's Sky or Final Fantasy XIV level comeback? That's one question the community asked, and we're going to talk about it as we look back at the launch about 1 year ago today. We're going to look at where the game is at today and a look towards the future on this episode of Loot Drops. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining me today is Paul Tassi from Forbes. Thank you, Paul, for joining us today. And James Duggan, co-worker at IGN, who is very carefully sitting within the frame if you're watching the video. Oh, no!
Hi, everybody.
So thank you guys for joining the show today. And we're going to kick things off by sort of taking a look back to the launch of Anthem. Duggan, you and I played a ton of this. Paul, I know you were playing. You were talking about various guns that you can acquire, how to farm them, things like that. So let me start off with the question. What caused the most pain for the community at launch? Why does it have this negative stigma that they just can't shake? How did that happen? James, you want to start?
Sure. The game wasn't good. That's that was kind of the root of the issues, and there are a lot of reasons as to why that was. And I think that we can probably break down why those were. But I actually want to pass it to Paul, and then I kind of want to go through Destin. You and I, every time we saw Anthem, we saw it together before release at E3 when we did the IGN first. I kind of want to. I think it'd be interesting for the audience to go through and give them perspective on what that whole process is like, and kind of our view of the game and how it didn't necessarily match up with what we were expecting, and then when it launched. And So Paul.
Yeah, I didn't get the whole like big run up to it. Like I wasn't doing all the hands-on demos and stuff, so I had it pretty much right around when launch is supposed to start. And the problems immediately were technical, where it was borderline impossible to play for it, at least the first couple of days, the first week or two. I can't remember how long it lasted, but it was kind of like Diablo 3 launch level bad, where you couldn't do really anything.
You couldn't sign on. A lot of people literally couldn't sign on, and they paid extra to get that early access. That was a huge mistake. And then I was looking through collecting assets, and to your point, the rumor started that it was bricking PS4s, which we found out later wasn't true, but PS4.
It wasn't bricking them, but it was causing like hard shutoffs, where like that actually happened to me, where like I've never had a game crash so hard it turned off my entire console. It was my Xbox actually, but like that was totally wild. And like it didn't brick anything, but that's still a little bit of a warning flag. But moving past the technical problems, once the game actually started, we can get into this a bit, but I think the central problem with the game was people, Destiny fans expecting this really deep shooter, like based on all these years of learning things from other shooters. And then BioWare fans were expecting really deep story. And it was kind of a combination of those that didn't really do either thing all that well. And so a lot of people bounced off of that.
It was really fascinating reading the Schreier article about that. Did you check that out, Duggan?
Yes. Yeah. But I actually want to jump to something Paul said, which is a comparison to Diablo 3. I think that's actually a very good one, because not only were there a lot of technical issues at launch, but then there were a lot of RPG issues as well. Fundamental things that you would imagine a AAA developer like BioWare or like Blizzard at the time of Diablo 3's release would understand. And it was, I think, really a lack of understanding, but maybe less a lack of understanding and more a lack of execution when it came to Anthem's initial failure. And when I did my review, there were parts of the game I really liked. I think that Destin, when you and I saw the game the first time, it was at E3 2017, 2018?
Yeah, I can actually bring up that original trailer. So right now we're gonna play
when we
the
played
reveal. When we played it.
But just fake reveal.
Just to take you back, the reveal trailer and all the stuff that they had. They said this was running in engine. So somewhere there was a version of this Anthem running, and if you read the Schreier article, they scrapped it. So Duggan, you're talking about the events we went to. We encountered technical problems every single time we were at an event.
Not necessarily. The first time I played it, I was with like Sean Finnegan and Casey DeFreitas, and we went up. John Warner was there, really nice gentleman, works at BioWare still, I believe, and he took us through a vertical slice, which, if you're not an experienced games media person, it's very, very easy to be fooled by that, and I certainly was. I think I was. I got taken through Fort Tarsis, past a Titan. The whole thing felt great. We jumped to face off against the Swarm Tyrant, and the whole thing felt really good. And I mean, like, with the expectation that you could go anywhere and do anything, and there was going to be all these extra layers of RPG elements, it sold me. And I think before the game came out, I was looking forward to Anthem in such a way that I was like, this is going to be something that I want to make a fire team chat about. This is going to be something that maybe we should spin up a fan site about. Like, that was the level of expectation that people had for this game, especially me. Disappointing wasn't the right word. I don't think, like, I don't necessarily feel wronged. Like, I didn't pay for the game. I got a review copy and I reviewed it, and gave it a 6.5 because it wasn't good. But it was really, really interesting to see this reveal, and then play this reveal, and have both of those experiences be good, and then go to Edmonton and play it without, I guess, the blinders off, and see how much of a disaster it was. Even more so than when it launched. At that point, it was in really, really rough shape. But I played this the following E3, not at this reveal. I believe this was the I don't even remember. It was either 2015 or 2017.
It was
the following E3.
It was 2 years after this trailer hit, I think. Yeah. So and actually, you did jog my memory. They brought us back after EA Play, or their EA presentation. It was like a small side room with that, like, 5 people could fit in. And they let you play. Is that the time you're talking about? Yeah,
that's exactly the time I'm talking about.
I forgot about that. That was
actually pretty good.
We ever got hands on, I believe.
The flying felt good. Going from air to ground felt good. The combat, you could tell the combat was a little bit weird. I did have a bug where I fell through the floor, but aside from that, like, the basics were there. The shooting wasn't super punchy, but it was definitely serviceable in the context of the combo system, in the context of the cool movement, and just the whole idea of being Iron Man, essentially. And being able to take off at any point and kind of use any of your abilities on the ground or in the air was a really, really exciting and interesting one. And I was really excited to see what they would do with that. Turned out to not be too much, but
well, so the problem with Anthem is, and I know everyone who is still, who gave Anthem a chance, and there's still some Anthem players out there actively. There's not many, but they exist. And one of the issues was that combat was always, like, kind of okay, and, like, builds were okay. But then one of the things that had improved over time was by the end, and when they started introducing, like, new weapon types and giving, like, they gave huge buffs to, like, everything on the player side, like damage and health and, like, all this stuff. And it eventually got to a point, like, later in its life cycle, where you could it reminded me of Diablo, where you would get that build, like that Necromancer build that just rips up everything. But, like, 95% of players probably never got to that point and never saw how good it could feel. And, like, that didn't solve all its issues because they were just fundamental kind of core content problems with the game. But to me, that is, and if we're talking about the potential future of Anthem and coming back, to me, that is one of its core strengths, at least as it exists now, where if you, like, the technical problems are pretty much solved now. They've done all this buffing and balancing and all this stuff. And so the core feel of it is kind of, it's not like better than Destiny or something, but for what it is and that type of style, I think it does feel fundamentally really great. And that's probably the strongest thing it has working for it if they are going to keep trying to make it happen.
So I want
to
sorry, Duggan.
Well, I just want to piggyback.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You beat me to it. Go.
Delay. Okay.
2 hosts competing.
Yes. I want to piggyback off of what Paul said about, the core mechanics feeling really good, and actually answer a question in chat from Faradin, who said, when you say it wasn't good, do you mean that the core gameplay and mechanics are bad, or rather that the technical mess and the shallow end game with repetitive missions was the problem. I think it was a combination of both at launch. I think that there were times when the combat felt really good. There were times when it all came together. I think like the first time I fought an Ash Titan was really, really good. And then I looked for that experience again. First of all, there weren't enough instances of that level of experience again. It was like the Swarm Tyrant, the Titan, the Monitor, and that was it. Those were the bosses that were making you utilize that really cool air to ground, back to ground, or back to air gameplay. And the problem was it was really inconsistent. There were so many instances where a legendary effect wouldn't trigger, or a telegraph that, like, there was a lava wave on the ground that was like 50 feet away from me that I had dodged 5 seconds prior, hit me in the air. And when you have something that like that, where you have this really, really punishing mechanic, which I love in boss encounters, by the way, like get out of the way or you're going to die mechanics. I love those. The problem is they have to work. So the combat was good, asterisk, and the asterisk being it was really inconsistent. So therefore I couldn't really recommend it. So I hope that kind of clarifies that point.
Well, actually, we've talked a lot about the technical challenges of actually getting the game to launch and the constant crashes and like the PS4 thing. But one of the criticisms leveled at your review, and I'd love to hear you actually get a chance to respond to this, is that, oh, you played it without the day one patch. That's actually that's not true, because we didn't launch the review ahead of time, did we? We waited.
I did. Yeah, I didn't wait. I wanted to go. They just happened to launch the day one patch. I wish I had 3 hands so I could do 3 quotation marks with day one there. Day one patch. They launched it a couple hours before I put the review live, and I put the review on hold. Played a few hours, specifically went to try and target things that were giving me problems that they said they would have addressed, and the vast majority of those were not fixed. There was still a long way to go, and I think the people who've played recently with Ice Tide, and it's just like we have one more. God, what are they even called? Strike dungeon.
Strongholds.
Thank you very much.
We gotta know what strongholds are called. I called it for
I know.
doing an Anthem.
It's been a long time. Here comes crap in the chat. So the answer there is I didn't wait. The day one patch happened to hit. I think when you're reviewing a game, the thing that you have to think about is you have a duty to the consumer, and that's where I'm motivated from. I don't care what the developer is telling me. I don't care what the excuses are. If I could have paid for this game and be getting this experience right now as a consumer, then I'm going to review the game as such. And the day one patch was a day 7 patch. I have the dates actually right here. Players got PC players with 7 days early access. It launched on February 15th, effectively. And then 7 days later, on February 22nd, or maybe it was the 21st.
That was global launch, right?
Right. That was when the day one patch came out.
And that's like anybody who pre-ordered it on PC was in and playing 7 days before the global launch. The whole launch thing was really confusing and troubled from the
Well, the joke was that it was like an alpha test, and like the people with the special access were like bug testing it for the.
It should have been an alpha test.
Wait, but it should have been. I don't know why they're giving crap about your review, because like it wasn't fixed after the day 7 patch
it was
either.
Not.
It wasn't fixed for like months.
And as a reviewer, okay, so first of all, we launched the review after the day one patch, and then second of all, as a reviewer at that point, you have a choice. If I'm going to wait another 7 days to kind of review the whole thing, the choice is inform millions of people who are about to make a poor $60 purchase that they may have a hard time getting refunds for. We didn't know, or play for a few hours to the best of my ability with the fixes, which there weren't any, and then incorporate that into the review, which I did. So it's interesting. A lot of videos that I've seen in retrospect say that reviewers who reviewed the game before the day one patch kind of gave it a bad start. And look, the game gave itself a bad start. It was a bad game at launch.
Yeah, funny story. So I got crap for my 7.25 for being too high. Because that was one of the highest mainstream scores, I think, at the time. And people were like, did you even play this? And like, so I'm kind of surprised you were getting crap for your 6.5. Well,
yeah, I mean, the life of reviewers, you get crap no matter what you say, but you do it anyway.
Let's dive into that, Paul, for a second, because I think the idea that 7.5 is too high is maybe a weird criticism to level at you, obviously, because it's a low score. But what was it that you liked about the game? Clearly, it wasn't all bad if
I was
you
pretty
played it as
like
long as you did.
like my theory for a very long time with Anthem, probably for 6 months at least, was this has potential. They can build on this. They can fix this. Like, I don't think this is going to be shutting off my Xbox, indefinitely. So like, I was willing to push past at least some of those. Like, I mean, I still keep it a pretty low score in the grand scheme of things, but I liked, at least doing the first run through of the missions. I liked, I thought the strongholds were good. I thought the combat was really good. Like, BioWare had fixed all their like weird face animation, crap issues that they had with Andromeda. And so I was like, okay, this is like very bare bones, but like, I'm going to start moving into the end game. Like, I'm going to assume this is games of service. So they're going to be adding a lot of stuff to it and they're going to build on it. And they did over time, but like, it was so slow and there was so much to go. And at least for a while, they kept making like these changes that didn't make much sense or didn't really help very much. And the whole endeavor just seemed like, okay, well, they're never going to get there. And so I gave up on it eventually. I think I stopped playing. Like, I was really impressed. I was at the height of me being impressed with Anthem when the Cataclysm came out. I'm like, okay, this is actually a very cool thing. Like, this is the first of truly major content they delivered. This is fun. And then after that, it's like, well, we're moving to a seasonal content model. We have holiday events, and like, so some people have been enjoying those, but it's pretty much dropped off. And then we got this word that they're doing this revamp thing. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, and we can get into that later. But I kind of lost hope eventually when it seemed like everyone was leaving BioWare, and there was like, it didn't seem like there was any sort of true plan for it. And I remain skeptical that there is, or that's worth pursuing. But for a very long time, I had a good amount of hope that at least they could, with the right investment, with the right decisions made, it could be built into something more than it was and be like a competitor in the genre. And like, that didn't happen, but I was willing to at least give it time to do that, which is why I have like 150 hours into it, because I kept coming back to try and, let it do that.
There were things I liked about the game. I liked the traversal mechanics and flying around and shooting. That all felt good when it was working properly. The combo system, like, that's just a holdover from Mass Effect, and that's always been fun since Mass Effect 2 it was introduced. Maybe even Mass Effect 1 it was already there, where you could like create biotic explosions and ability powers like that. I have a lot of fun with those things. So I like that part of it. The problems were that held it back mostly were loot. Loot was tremendously bad at launch, to the point where you were basically running the Tyrant Mine stronghold, I believe. That's all you did. That was like how you farmed your loot. And there were some builds that were really powerful. That was fun, but that gave me about 100 hours of gameplay. One other aspect we haven't really discussed is the storyline. Yeah, the storyline. Sorry, chat's been talking about story in the tower parts. There were parts of the story that I like. I like the unveiling of the betrayal. I like, defeating the final boss and everything. I do feel like the story is almost trying to be too smart for its own good. The whole idea that we have to shut down these vibrating things that the gods left. I don't know,
shut
but
down
I know
the gods' vibrators, man. They're screwing up the planet.
Right? Like,
they're too big.
It's that's a really good way to put it. It's just, it seems ridiculous. You have this big old subwoofer you got to shut down every half an hour, in free play.
I assumed the Shaper relics were going to shape something and change the world at some point. I still have yet to see that really happen in a significant way, but I think there were parts of the story that succeeded. The facial animation was freaking fantastic.
Yes.
They focused very hard on that after Andromeda.
Yeah, I empathized with Owen and Halleck until Owen was a jerk. But I think the place where the story really, really failed for me is it butted heads and came up against so hard the multiplayer portions of the game, where, I think if you play Diablo 3, and it's just about the cooperation, right, and the multiplayer experience in this RPG, and you don't really give too much of a crap about the story, or even if you do, you can experience it together. As where with Anthem, it was, okay, let's sit through this huge loading screen, and then we'll all get together and do this repetitive mission, where the majority of the story exposition is just about justifying the reuse of standing on a platform for the 100th time. And then once we're done with that, we're going to all go back to the home base independently, Fort Tarsis independently, and have different narrative experiences at our own pace, and all come back into the world out of sync and be unready to play with each other. So it's almost like those two things, this kind of conventional BioWare narratively driven single player experience and the multiplayer ARPG experience, neither of which they really nailed in my opinion, don't mesh at all. In fact, it goes together like toothpaste and orange juice in my opinion.
I still have nightmares about slow walking around Fort Tarsis.
Oh,
like,
God.
that was one of the most unfun activities in any video game ever. Like, the story parts in there with the conversations were fine, but like having to go back there every time and then like wade through these like fixed crowds to get to each NPC, like, oh, it was exhausting.
Let's
They could
fast
have
forward.
justified it narratively if your character had been 80 years old and he was some holdover and he's the only
felt
one who
like
can pilot
that,
a jet.
yeah.
I got out of my super suit, now I gotta saunter over and find out. Anyway.
Let's fast forward real quick to what is happening with the game today. And somebody tweeted this list at us of all the additions. So shout out to them. I'm sorry, I don't have their name off the top of my head.
I'm going to find their name because they're a champion.
Yeah, it's a community collection.
Fort Tarsis guy.
The guys over at Fort Tarsis. You're right. So it's just everything that's been added to launch, and they talk about the Echoes of Reality, which was basically the launch thing, and then everything that's been added. We had Cataclysms. We have the seasonal events. I got to experience that yesterday, and I signed on and did a little bit of free play before the show today just to get a little bit more experience. And after the show, if you're watching live, I'll be playing the game some more tonight.
I gotta go to bed. I don't know what you're doing.
Paul, you guys are going to sleep. I know. But right now, the Ice Tide event's going on, and it's like a score-based speed run of the strongholds. It incentivizes you to do a different stronghold from Tyrant Mine, and it actually does some really smart things. And they offer, well, smarter than what they had at launch. I'll say that.
Which was nothing. Wait, sorry. Can I cut in here first, though?
Yeah,
because as you're listing all this stuff, one of the core issues as time went on that I kept like being like, guys, like what was the roadmap, where you have a game like Destiny where you have a roadmap and it's like, here's all the things that are coming. Mm-hmm. They hit those dates, the things come. Anthem set up the same system and it missed everything. I think it had a month roadmap and it had like 6 things, 7, 8 things on it, and it maybe did one minor thing. And then they're like, okay, we're not going to do like these specific date roadmaps. We're going to do Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So they did Act 1, and then Act 1 finished, and they're like, we're canceling Act 2 and 3. It's like, and then we're moving to a seasonal model, and and no one really knew what that meant, and now we're kind of seeing that. But like, that was one of the problems, is that it felt like they just had no idea what they're doing, or did not have the ability to develop this content on the schedule that they had originally proposed for themselves. And like, I get that they're new to the genre and stuff, but like, they really overpromised how much the game was gonna evolve, and it took like months and months and months and months, and they finally did the Cataclysm, and that was like the biggest thing. And they're like, okay, well, they finally did something, but at that point they'd lost so much of the player base because they missed all the other stuff. It was like, how many people were around to actually experience that? Like a fraction of the launch base.
Speaking about
I just thought that was a core issue.
Yeah, speaking about Cataclysm, I got the trailer playing right now. They make it look like this epic event where you have to go in, and like, they don't lie in the trailer. They say you're limited time and you gotta plan your multiplayers. You could literally stay in there all day if you played well with the team and get a huge score racked up. And basically, you run through it, you kill the final boss, and you get the new shard economy that was added to the game. That would allow you to buy cosmetics and such. And look, I know they've added a lot. I know they have seasonal events, and the seasonal event is very, very charming. I still think that the game does look beautiful at moments. The problem is, and Duggan hit it on the head, they don't have the gameplay loop nailed down. It's still...
That's like step one, man.
Yeah.
It's still how you iterate on that after. And I understand that game development is a process where you have to build all elements at once so it can all come together. But like, if you can't figure out what is fun about your game and the basic loop and then build around that, I think they're just starting to do interesting stuff with like the speed running of strongholds to get better loot. That's not perfect, but it's definitely something. It's definitely something in the right direction. I think that the idea of seasonal content, the idea of moving from a very, very busted place, moving towards a seasonal model, which now it seems like we're also maybe getting this revamp, which would be great, and I'll reevaluate at that point. But for now, the idea of like seasonal Halloween, Christmas events in a game that has so many things that need fixing or so many fundamental elements that still need to be examined. The loot, the crafting is still the same as it was at launch.
God.
So,
God, I forgot.
And so a seasonal model just doesn't really work for a game like Overwatch that launches and it's freaking phenomenal and people get it. And yes, it has some problems, but for the vast majority of folks, they're going to stick around and it's only going to get better from here. And the seasonal content is going to add something to that. I think the idea of seasonal content is attractive from a place of monetization, but as a player, it's really unattractive because what this game needs is a much more linear, we fixed all this stuff and we're going to call this expansion 1, and we fixed all this stuff and we're going to call it expansion 2. So I think there have been so many games that I've played in a pre-release early access state that haven't been that great that have turned out to be really phenomenal games. Hunt Showdown, Warframe, No Man's Sky even, that was a disaster at launch. So Diablo 3, like that is game as a service development as of 2020 is there are significant portions of games that come out in really, really bad shape, and get to a place where they've fixed almost everything and have started to iterate beyond that and are really finding something special. And I just don't think Anthem is going to get there personally.
Yeah, and
I think if we compare, well, I just want to throw this little earworm at you. If we compare this to Destiny 2, which it can't be avoided, the timeline for Destiny 2, a year after Destiny 2 released, which Destiny 2 when it launched had a lot of issues. A year later, we're getting Forsaken. And we are a year after, we're 1 year chronologically after the release of Anthem. And I just don't think that there is anywhere near as much innovation or content to show for it.
Yeah, well, to address really quick what chat's talking about, they're talking about the crafting system and how you can craft legendary weapons and such. I think that's good for the hardcore audience that's still in there, playing Anthem, trying to do what they're trying to do with their builds and such. However, it doesn't address the problem that we're laying out right now, and that's the gameplay loop still isn't where it needs to be. You're powering up for what? What are you going to fight? The Shaper Storms ended up being a time trial. We thought they would be like the raid equivalent in Anthem, and we just never got the end game challenge that we had expected or built up in our heads. Maybe that's a little bit on us, but it just feels like there's no reason to power up. There's no content on the roadmap that we're powering up to get ready for, and yeah.
I want to jump in and just correct this for the VOD. The crafting system is not the same as launch. I misspoke. That is my mistake. So
it's one of those things that's hard to keep up on all the changes.
Especially in a game that you don't enjoy and isn't good.
Fundamentally, I think we're talking even too small here, because it's not even just about, okay, well, they say they introduce a raid or something and it's a 6-man activity and they are emulating Destiny. Like, it's not enough. And like, I get that there are probably people in chat here that are still playing Anthem because they start talking about Anthem. They're like, someone's talking about Anthem, and like, I am thrilled that there are still people playing Anthem, but the core problem here is bringing people in that are not here yet, because the player base is obviously a fraction of what BioWare wants it to be. And so that leaves only a scarce couple of options that would even potentially have the reach to fix it, and that's like a major Taken King size expansion, or just a new game like Anthem 2. We did it right this time, but I have a fundamental problem believing in either of those paths forward, even if BioWare is saying they're still committed to it, this and that. The core difference between this situation and these other games we're talking about, so take Final Fantasy or Diablo. Like, those are really storied franchises that have a long history, and like, they're, hugely devoted fan bases of the whole series. So they are going to work and devote tons and tons of stuff to make that happen. Anthem does not have that. Anthem is a brand new IP that very few people are attached to, and it's more really of a meme than anything. Like, at this point, like, it's kind of sad to say, but that is, you bring up Anthem now, you'll get a Twitter thread of jokes, a mile long, because that's just how.
Literally saw it on Reddit today.
In history. But then on the other side of the coin, say you take a new IP, you have Destiny 2 or your Destiny 1, because that had its problems at launch, or you have No Man's Sky. Those were new IPs. They worked and they got better. The difference there is that Bungie was only working on Destiny and was working.
You cut out, Paul. Bungie was what?
Bungie was only working on Destiny, like to fix Destiny. Hello Games just devoted their souls to making No Man's Sky as best as they could. But like, what's the state of BioWare right now? I mean, how can BioWare possibly be committing that much to Anthem at this point if they're making Dragon Age and they're going to bring back Mass Effect? And like we can see, it's kind of it's a skeleton crew that's on Anthem right now. So it's very hard to see them developing a huge, significant change of content to bring people back like that.
The smartest thing that I've seen them do is they have been doing tiny Anthem updates, and it's great to see the community here today talking about why they're happy that they are making these updates and improving the game slowly. However, I don't think they should put too much effort into that, because they need to do what they did with Final Fantasy XIV if they ever have a chance at relaunching this and getting consumer interest. They need to nuke it. That's what they did with Final Fantasy 14. They literally blew it up. They blew up the world, and then you came back a while later and they're like, hey, we're back, and they relaunched the whole game. Diablo didn't ever take the game offline, but they had to basically restructure.
They shut down the Real Money Auction House. They did Loot 2.0, Reaper of Souls, and I would even argue still that game could be so much better, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to bring up something somebody in chat said, Orbital Wings. What do you think BioWare has actually been doing over the past year? There's allegedly more people working on the game right now than there were at launch, which I know is kind of conflicting with what we're saying. And obviously, this is all secondhand information, so we don't have a periscope into BioWare to see exactly how many people are working on this game. But I would hope that they would be working on that kind of reboot, because I think that's what it needs. There's one game I want to bring up here that a lot of folks were excited about, and just the fastest Final Fantasy style 14. Take this game offline and we're going to redo it. We're sorry. And that's Artifact. That is a game that immediately fell on its sword.
Oh, the card game.
The card game. Like, what is that? Oh,
yeah. Immediately fell on its sword, and I respect that. And I think Anthem really has to do that. I don't even want to go as far to say there is a fun gameplay loop here. I've had a lot of fun moments in Anthem. I've had a couple of hero moments, especially in Strongholds, especially fighting stuff like the Ash Titan. But it really takes going back to the drawing board and having the humility to even for a AAA developer as huge and as famous as BioWare, to say we're kind of going to revert to early access here. And this is going to be, we're going to figure it out with you, but we're dedicated to it. Because if you pretend like you got it right, or you pretend like you know what you're doing, then you end up with the what we had at launch. And I think really just getting your work out there and getting feedback on it is a really important process of making it better. And I wish they'd done that sooner.
I don't think it's worth it. I think they should take the best parts of Anthem and put them in the new Mass Effect game. Like, I don't know how much they're going to invest in this, but like, and I too have had fun with Anthem and think there are fun parts of it, but like the sheer amount of stuff they would have to do just seems insurmountable. And like, I guess we've seen magical turnaround stories before, but it is hard to imagine.
Let's talk about their last two games. So Mass Effect Andromeda was a dud, and Anthem was largely problematic from the get-go. And they're both built on a flawed engine, and that's Frostbite. I've heard so many stories about how Frostbite is difficult to work with. There are developers out there that are able to make the engine work for them in ways that they want. But you have Respawn over here knocking it out of the park. And what are they not held back by? They're not held back by being forced to use Frostbite. Now, let's say the rumors are true that they do have a team bigger than ever working on Anthem right now. I would bet they're working on a different engine than Frostbite to build it from the ground up.
Really?
I think
that seems
okay.
That
well,
seems
I'm
like
being
a shot in the dark.
I'm being pie in the sky, but I think if they're really going to come back, there is no way they're staying on that engine, because they're going to have the same damn problems at launch.
That's like remaking an entire AAA title from scratch.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about that. So at E3, they said they played it. If the story is to be believed, an EA executive played it, and they took out Flight or something, and he's like, what are you doing? Put it back in. So they like reformatted the game from the ground up in like a year or some insane timeline to get it back out. So the thing I'm talking about, Anthem 2.0 or whatever it is, it's not coming like this summer. I'm thinking about something like 2-3 years off. I don't think they're going to give up on this.
So then it'll be a next gen.
That's
Exactly.
That's the best case scenario. And at that point, to Paul's point, financially, is that worth it? You know, I think at some point the good graces of your community stops being profitable, and video games are a profit-driven business.
Absolutely.
I did an interview with Vince, speaking of Apex, about
Vince Zampella.
Yeah, the monetization.
That guy?
I'm on a first name basis with him. Sorry. About the monetization of the Iron Crown event, which was bad.
Oh God, that was so bad.
It was real rough, and it was very anti-player, anti-consumer, and they were pretty much apathetic about it. They were like, "Yeah, we actually had a lot of positive feedback, and we're probably going to do it again." So, bye. And I think at some point, like, okay, well, the game's free, so I can't complain all that much.
Community had your back, though.
Yeah, that's true. Even though it would be a gift that the community deserves, to give the community of Anthem that has stuck with it and even the people on the fringes, to deliver them Anthem 2.0, I think it would be a better business move to do Anthem 2, or to Paul's point, maybe just put it in the next Mass Effect game or spin it off into something else. Take the lessons that you learned and move on with that, because they do seem in this kind of conventional iterative design cycle, as opposed to something that would facilitate a game as a service like Anthem from becoming something really good, which I think, if I had been a senior member of the development team at BioWare, I would have been like, "Yo, we should put this in early access." And people are like, "That's ridiculous. We're BioWare. We can't do that." But it's like, take a look around. Maybe that's what it needs, and maybe it wouldn't be received super well by fans, but maybe it's very cheap up front, or maybe you're paying a monthly subscription, or maybe it's free with Origin access, or like, I think there needed to be a really, really hard look at this game and what it was just months before launch. Because when we went to play it in Canada, it was really rough. And the idea that it was all going to come together at the end and be good is ridiculous in the concept of the most ambitious game genre there is, which is multiplayer, high fidelity ARPG, pseudo MMO shared worlds. Like those are the most ambitious, resource intensive games to make, and they take a really, really long time. And I think when you're patient and when you're transparent with the community, you get a good result, even if it's something as ridiculous as Star Citizen. And when you're cryptic and guarded and aloof and you release a game, you get a really bad result in a conventional way. But yeah, that's my
here's the problem I have, where like even the best case scenario, let's say they do the full on thing and it's Anthem 2 Reborn in like 3 years for next gen. I feel like the Anthem name is almost just working against it at this point, because even though if we have a cluster of fans that are like, no, they've done a lot of improvements, they're supporting it, it's a very small group. And like in the general public, as soon as people hear the word Anthem again, it's a negative reaction. Whereas Mass Effect Andromeda, like you feel bad about, Andromeda was bad, but you still have that core like love for Mass Effect, and so that's enough to drive you forward. Well, and secondly, okay, you can push back on that.
I want to push back on your first point, and then let you make your second point. No Man's Sky Next had the angriest mob I've ever seen, full of vitriol and hatred for that franchise. They waited, I don't know how many years. Well, okay, yeah. I don't know how many years they waited until they launched No Man's Sky Next, but it was a full 180. I think that Anthem launched during a time when Mass Effect had bombed. They were dealing with this microtransaction stuff, and they were just ready to pounce the community. And they had good reason to when Anthem launched, because of how the state that it launched in. So I would argue that we have seen instances before where there was such anger and hatred for a property that did a full 180 with a game like No Man's Sky.
Yeah, especially No Man's Sky is like it's like such a miracle. Like I don't even know what else to compare it to, because like all the other games we're talking about, Final Fantasy, Diablo, even Destiny. Like Destiny had its problems, but that established a pretty hardcore fan base relatively quickly. Like it was built up right away. Whereas you're right. No Man's Sky is like the whole that was the same thing where like you mentioned that and it was a joke for months and months and months, and like now that's different, and like that's kind of really the only example I can think of that was not an established franchise. So I guess I can't say that it's impossible, but this seems different to me in a lot of ways.
I would
There's
agree
actually two GDC talks.
We
one
cut Paul off
from...
on his second point. We'll come back.
Oh,
Oh,
it's all right.
sorry.
Okay.
Continue.
Just my second point was like it's going back to the Anthem 2 thing. It was just I don't know what about Anthem is worth salvaging other than its best elements, which are the mechanics, like the combat, the flying, the combos, the weapons, because I don't think there's enough in the world, like, the Shapers and the couple characters we met. Like, I don't think anyone has grown that attached to that subsection of the game to be like, oh, I can't wait to see, so-and-so again, as opposed to, say, like Mass Effect, whereas Mass Effect is almost like the Star Wars of the video game universe in terms of like how rich that world is and like how built up that whole universe is. And so like, I don't know what value you're really bringing outside of the central core mechanics, but that was just my second point.
I don't have a rebuttal to that one.
Yeah.
There are, I think when it comes to like the differences, I think maybe No Man's Sky and Anthem are a good comparison in the sense that they aren't really established franchises, and one has this 180-degree turnaround and the other does not. There were two GDC talks from Diablo 3's Blizzard's Josh Mascara, who's now no longer with Blizzard. I think he's with Camp... whatever, who cares? I'm just kidding if you're watching. I love your work. And then Sean Murray of Hello Games, who did a very similar talk, and these were kind of a decline and rise talk. Josh Mascara's was all about identifying mechanically what was wrong and fixing it and moving forward in a very positive manner. And Sean Murray's was about parsing feedback that is valuable versus feedback that is just purely toxic. What are the actual people who are playing your game saying about your game? And you need to focus on them a step at a time, and that's how you improve your game. I don't necessarily I feel like BioWare, on the other hand, just had a gut punch and had the wind knocked out of them when this game came out, because they hadn't really had anything like this aside from Mass Effect Andromeda. And I think this was even worse than that, because I think this got a lot of flack for making Mass Effect Andromeda bad, was kind of the community sentiment. Was like, oh, you devoted all your resources to this game as a service and it wasn't even good, how dare you? So I can't even imagine especially with all the bureaucracy from that Jason Schreier article, like what that must have felt like for the development team. For Hello Games, they're independent developers who are, they're getting a lot of flack, but they were able to kind of find the positive and move forward and make something good come out of it. And I really think that's a mindset thing, and I would be really, really surprised if BioWare was able to do that, especially when they used to be such a beloved studio.
Well, no one had any expectations for Hello Games. Everyone just thought that game would just die.
Oh, totally.
And then Hello Games said nothing for like 6 months.
Like, we're back.
And then they came out and they're like, no, we've been doing stuff, like we've been working hard, but like no one was really like, oh, I can't, wait for this big No Man's Sky turnaround. And like that wasn't promised. They weren't. I mean, they mentioned it a little bit, but they went so radio silent. No one had any idea what they were doing or what they were,
No
what
Man's
the
Sky
end result would be. Yeah.
So that team actually released a bunch of small updates, continually supporting the community that was there. Smaller updates like being able to, stack things, and I think they added vehicles. I don't remember specifically, but then the big relaunch was No Man's Sky Next, when they're like, here's like 900 things that are.
I'm talking about before that. There was a gap between, I think, like launch and like I think vehicles may have been the first update, or like freighters. It was like one of the first smaller updates, but there was a gap of like many months where they had said nothing about the failure of the game, really, like nothing about the promises they broke, blah blah blah. And like it was just a very strange time. Like they disappeared off the face of the earth, and like then they came back and started doing that stuff. But at that time, it was like very eerily silent.
Yeah.
Artifact.
Yeah.
And, I really hope Artifact comes back.
And I do feel like the Anthem team has largely been silent. It's interesting to know what James and I know from having been to BioWare, and I'm sure you've met with a lot of the developers too, Paul. It doesn't seem like they have the same pessimism. They do seem hopeful about the game. But I don't know if that's just a public-facing thing, because Chad Robertson has left and Ben Irving has left, just the people that I go, and I know there's more than that I'm missing, but people have been leaving.
I don't know who's running it now. Like, I don't know if there's just this huge team. I mean, maybe it's just this big secret covert ops thing, but like all the people I could name that were on the team are gone, outside of maybe like a community manager.
Mark Dara's over on Dragon Age.
Or they're working on something else.
John Warner's still there?
John Warner's still there, but he's been dealing with personal family issues for over last holiday. I hope that's all been better. But Gamble, I think he moved on to be a manager, and
he's doing Mass Effect.
Is that the rumor? Do we know that?
I heard he was doing the new Mass Effect game. Like he's in charge of it or something. I don't know. I don't know how true that is. But
hopefully the structural challenge that they have within the company can be addressed. So yeah, I guess the question that I'll just ask for a real quick recap is, what would it have to do to be successful? Is that even possible, James?
Yeah, I kind of want to jump into that with a comment left by somebody on Twitch who said, the fact is Anthem is not as bad as the haters say. I don't think it's about being not bad. I think it's about being really, really good. And that's the bar that you're setting when you have a game as a service. When I play a single player narratively driven game, even if I'm super immersed, I'm maybe coming away with like 60, maybe if I'm super into mods and stuff, 200 hours out of that. If I'm playing a game as a service, multiplayer ARPG, you're talking about thousands or maybe tens of thousands of hours of commitment. There's a level of fanaticism that fans like myself have for games like World of Warcraft, the Diablo series, even Destiny, which was not a backhanded compliment at Destiny. So I think it's not about being not bad. It's about really, really standing out and making something special. And I think when you fail at the fundamental RPG elements at launch, it's really, really hard to do that. And I guess when you review a game, especially a game as a service, you know that your review is going to be lingering around for at least a year before you kind of have an opportunity to re-review it as a conventional games media person. And based upon what I've seen so far, even kind of secondhand, even looking at the amount of content, the amount of updates, the nature of the updates, the fact that they're kind of more seasonal than they are hard content, the fact that there's only one more stronghold. The prerogative I don't think is good. And if it does, I'll be surprised. But that's not to say I don't want that to happen, because I do, because I think more games like this deserve to exist. The MMO genre is my favorite genre of all time. And granted, this is not an MMO, but it is certainly MMO adjacent. So yeah, I want it to do well.
Yeah, I don't think any of us ever want to see a game fail. I would love it if Anthem was successful. I did freelancer chat with Erics and Dantix. I had a lot of hope for the game, and I was excited about it, and I liked the builds of it. And it was very unfortunate to see what happened. And yeah, it just sucks. Paul, what about you? What do you think about the game's chances of making a comeback, or kind of getting over this negative stigma?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it's just not enough to just keep having these little, there's the community that exists. They have changes they want to make to keep them playing. The changes are made. The current community is pretty happy, but you need a moment. You need something that is going to get people back, or get people to give Anthem a second chance, or even a first chance if they didn't do it the first time. And that has to be something like, at minimum, it has to be something like a Taken King size expansion that changes the game in significant ways, adds significantly to the story, fleshes out the end game, fixes problems on that level. Or it's got to be something franchise wide, where it could be just a Final Fantasy total scrap and do over, or just a true sequel. Those two things are pretty much the only level of content that can be produced. And I think they should be produced in these big chunks. I don't think you can have a bunch of little chunks add up to a big thing, because people aren't going to pay attention to the little chunks, and then they won't get the whole picture. That's kind of what's happening now. Is it is a totally different game than it is at launch, and it is much better than it was back then. And people probably don't realize that, but that's the point. People don't realize that because of the way this has been handled, and there has not been a big moment to come back to.
That's so true. I totally agree.
I reiterate my skepticism, and I think this is very unlikely to happen, and this loot shooter market is only going to get more crowded. Destiny is still firing on all cylinders. We now have Borderlands 3 that's going to keep making content. Marvel Avengers game is a loot shooter now. One of the PS4 launch games is a loot slasher.
Another Anthem waiting to happen.
I mean, if there's anything that has a chance to be another Anthem, it's definitely that. We can do that on a different podcast.
That'd be a good episode.
But yeah. But now we have to wait till September to truly talk about it. Yeah. But fundamentally, kind of like what you said, Destin, where when this news is brought up that they're going to do this big, Anthem 2.0, or they're going to keep investing in it, the reaction was generally positive. Like, even if Anthem has left a negative taste in people's mouth, the reaction I heard was, okay, let's see what they got. And if they can deliver and pull some No Man's Sky-esque miracle and do it, I think everyone will be happy because people like this genre. They like, they want to play good games in the genre. That's not really debatable. It's just the realistic chances of that happening seem slim at this point, especially given the current state of BioWare and all their other priorities and, the state of the market as a whole. So, I mean, I'll give it a chance. Obviously, I'm looking forward to see what they can come up with, but man, that's a steep mountain.
Who doesn't love a good coming back from behind story? Like Rocky is built on that, and I like stories like that too. I love the No Man's Sky story. I love the Final Fantasy 14 story, and I think the reason the community latches onto that is because they're hopeful that Anthem could have the same sort of Phoenix-like rising out of the ashes, basically, of their original product. And I think that's what they need to do to come back, and I would love to see that. Real quick, I'll go around the table. James, any final points before we head out?
I just really agree with Paul's last point, which is it's really difficult to motivate anybody, even if you were an enthusiast at one point, to kind of come back and check the game out without some kind of big, new, bombastic content. And I think anybody who's in a Discord that fills up with friends can speak to that point where it's like, hey, come try this game. But yeah, you do need a selling point. I guess the final points I would make is, and I'm not to say they haven't done this with the stuff that they've released so far, but the core RPG elements are incentivized team play. The challenge should match the reward, and the open world should be sprawling with new and interesting and different things to do. And if you can't make that happen, focus it on things like time trials. Focus it on very intricate mechanical bespoke boss mechanics. That's, I think, probably a lot easier to develop from a resource standpoint than like, hey, we redid the whole world and it's great, all of it's awesome. If you make one really, really killer stronghold, or like a stronghold 2.0 that's kind of maybe more raid-esque.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Yeah, I'll just make my final point kind of simpler. And like, honestly, if you have Anthem right now and like you're not one of the core fans that are still playing it and like you didn't trade it into GameStop immediately, go back and try it. Like, honestly, even if you're just, dicking around in free play, you run some strongholds, I would be genuinely curious to see some people go back, 11 months later with all the changes they've made to just see at least how they think it feels. And like, no, I'm not saying you're going to be playing this for the next 100, 200 hours because the game cannot really sustain that right now. But I think some people should maybe check out and see what the changes that have been made. And I keep making comparisons to Diablo 3, where I feel like some aspects of it really can feel like that. And so if you want to know kind of the potential that could be there, I would go check it out in its current state, at least a little bit, and see what you think of it.
Yeah. I'm actually going to take your advice. If you're watching live, I'm going to keep playing Anthem right after this show. Real quick, I got to give you guys major thanks. James, thank you for making some time after work to, talk about Anthem. And Paul, thank you for staying up late. You're all the way on the East Coast, so it's like midnight. It's midnight, right?
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to be back. I think the plan is to do it in 2 weeks, but keep an eye on @DestinLegary on Twitter for updates, or Thug and Duggan, or @Paul Tassi, and we'll be sure to keep you guys posted. I'm going to sign off real quick, switch out some stuff with my UI, but thank you for watching this episode of Loot Drops. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.